was going to take us to a farm where they're picking coffee. He told the team we mustn't film the children. You're just picking the red ones?
Yes.
Yeah, and you leave the green ones on?
We reveal how young children working in grueling conditions are picking coffee on farms that supply Starbucks and Nespresso.
How old is he?
13 voy a cumplir.
You're 12 now.
Despite excessive hours in the field, they can earn in a day little more than we pay for a regular latte.
Who make more money, you know, Starbucks?
Nespresso promises their beans are ethically sourced, and so does Starbucks. Yet we find children struggling with the weight of the beans they pick for their coffee.
Bien duele la cintura bastante.
And we hear how our evidence shows Starbucks and Nespresso are in breach of international labour regulations.
These are all unsafe conditions for children, and in those conditions, children simply shouldn't be working.
In the last decade, there's been a coffee revolution. It's turned us into a nation of coffee lovers, and many of us are willing to pay a premium price for our favourite drink. And that revolution has been led by the US coffee giant Starbucks.
Starbucks is the world's biggest name in coffee, with annual global revenues of more than £20 billion. It's got almost 1,000 cafes in the UK, and since its launch here in 1998, it's racked up sales of more than £4 billion.
Nespresso is owned by Nestlé, and its sales in the UK have topped £1 billion. And it's sold more than 20 billion of its capsules worldwide.
One reason many of us are prepared to pay extra for our Starbucks latte or our Nespresso pod is not only the flavour of the coffee, but the claims from the companies that their coffee beans are ethically sourced. But do they live up to their promises?
Starbucks and Nespresso both make great play of their ethical credentials, caring for the planet and their workers. A major part of their claim to be ethical is that both their supply chains are free of child labour. In this Starbucks document, the company makes it clear that it has a zero tolerance to child labour. It says that an employer does not directly or indirectly employ any persons who are under the age of 14 or the legal working age. And similarly, Nespresso, in its own ethical document, says the hiring of minor workers under the legal age and the worst forms of child labour are prohibited. Last year, dispatches received information that some farms in Guatemala supplying these coffee giants were employing children. We wanted to find out more, but these companies don't openly publish a list of the farms they get their coffee from. But then we had a breakthrough. We obtained evidence that indicated some of the suppliers to Nespresso and Starbucks in Guatemala. And most importantly, it gave us their names and addresses. Bordering Mexico in Central America, Guatemala is one of the poorest countries in the world, but it produces 230,000 tonnes a year of some of the highest quality coffee. In December last year, our team made an initial trip to Guatemala to visit suppliers revealed in our evidence. They visited 4 coffee farms in 3 days. At the first, they saw 2 young boys as they were picking beans. One looked to the team to be around 8, and the other around 10. The farm foreman said they worked from 6 in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon. The next day, at another farm that our team was told supplies Starbucks and Nespresso, they came across a group of children picking. 2 girls told us they were 12. And they saw a boy carrying a heavy sack of coffee. Later that day, at another farm, they saw a 13-year-old boy who was busy picking. And on their last day, they saw several young children working. They spoke to 2 11-year-old boys, a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old girl who spoke to us about the basket she fills.
Bien duele la cintura bastante.
It was a startling discovery that every farm the team visited had children working on them. I wanted to visit the coffee fields for myself and try and speak to the children working. So I returned with the team to Guatemala in January to find out more. We headed deep into the countryside, where one of the cooperatives we'd been told about was busy with the coffee harvest.
We're just about to arrive at one of the co-ops that we know supplies coffee to Nespresso. We're going to turn up unannounced. We don't know if they'll let us in or whether they'll let us film anything. So we're going to see what we can find out.
When we arrived, the cooperative is busy processing beans. During our investigation, we didn't want to alert anyone to the real reason for our visit in case they moved children from the farms. So we said we were researching where some of Britain's favourite coffee comes from.
From picking to here, 20 days. Lovely, OK.
And it's clear Nespresso is a customer here.
They all go to Nespresso?
Todo se va para Nespresso. Todo. Sí, todo.
All of it?
All the coffee goes to Nespresso.
Oh.
Then they agreed to take us to a farm where picking was taking place, but they told our translator that some things were off limits.
We've just left the mill and one of the senior guys there, so he's going to take us to a farm. He told the team that there's children picking there and we mustn't film the children. I've got a secret camera on me. We'll have to see what we can find out. We just left the cars and we're walking down to the farm, so we've got to try and be a bit subtle about this. This is a bit of a trek, isn't it? Very, very steep.
We followed senior staff down the hill to where the pickers were based.
Which way? I'll follow you.
And it's really dense, hot, and infested with small biting insects.
Now, I can understand why we were told we'd never find this ourselves. There's absolutely no way you'd ever be able to find farms where they're picking. Crikey. How do you pick here?
Then the first person we come across is a child picking beans.
Ah, hola.
Buenas tardes.
Buenos tardes.
And as we turn around, we see another young-looking boy kneeling at a coffee bush.
Hello. Hola. So these are you're just picking the red ones? Yeah. And you leave the green ones on? Yeah. OK.
But with the staff from the mill sticking close by, we had to move on.
Hard. OK. Thank you.
The boy later told us he is 12 years old.
12.
OK.
But the staff stayed with him, and that allowed us to look for the first child we'd seen. He's working alongside his neighbour.
How old is he?
13 voy a cumplir.
You're 12 now. When did you start picking?
El año pasado.
Last year, when you were 11. It's hard, yeah.
Cuesta, fíjese.
The man tells us they're currently earning £5 a day, and this can work out as low as 31 pence an hour each.
You have to put this in bags and take it up to the top.
Ajá.
And he carries it? He carries a whole bag?
Sí.
You must be strong. You must be strong.
Él si hace el quintal va o 75 libras, él tiene que trabajar en Mecapalis.
£100 is equivalent to 45 bags of sugar.
And you take your money home to your parents?
Vamos a ver, yo la uso como para comprar comida.
Food? What food?
Así como verduras, ¿sabes?
And working in the coffee field means he's not going to school.
I'm just honestly, shocked at what we've seen, I mean, the walk down here was hard enough. I mean, it's really steep, to go back up, walk all that way with large amounts of coffee on you. I mean, it must be back-breaking work. The guy's just spoke to, he's a 12-year-old, he's been doing this since he's 11. They start work at 7 till 3 or, about 6, 7 hours work, 6 hours a day. Another 12-year-old, I didn't catch his name, also told us that, 6 days a week. And I asked them how much they get paid. They said $6.
OK, should we move on? OK, gracias.
We then clambered up to a point where all the coffee is weighed.
It's pretty difficult doing without carrying anything. Imagine what it's like with a heavy load of coffee beans.
Each picker must bring their own sack up the hill. Then we saw the first 12-year-old boy we'd met arrive with his bag. And he helps out with getting the collection of sacks weighed. The weight determines how much each worker has earned, which is worth less than £2 in wages. We've now witnessed child labour on several farms linked to Nespresso and Starbucks. Brands that are at the top of a long coffee supply chain, with cooperatives, farms and their workers at the bottom. It works like this. Once the coffee beans are picked on the farm, they're taken for processing. The coffee bean is washed and then dried at a mill, often run by a cooperative. The cooperative then sells the beans to an exporter and they'll be shipped out of the country. A roaster buys the beans and blends them to create the desired flavours. Household names like Starbucks and Nespresso roast their own coffee. Finally, the coffee is packaged and prepared for us to drink. In Guatemala City, a leading activist for workers' rights agreed to talk to me about what we'd seen.
Anthony from Channel 4. Hello. We're here in Guatemala investigating the coffee industry. We've been surprised to see children working in farms picking coffee. Just explain, why is that still happening?
En Guatemala, en este momento, más del 60% de la población se encuentra en pobreza y más del 24% en pobreza extrema. ¿Por qué trabajan los niños? Porque los padres, a pesar de que trabajan 15 o 16 horas al día, no son capaces siquiera de alimentar a sus hijos. Normalmente lo que están ganando no es suficiente para sobrevivir. Para sobrevivir en Guatemala tendrían que trabajar 5 miembros de la familia para alcanzar el costo de la canasta básica vital.
And when the average cost of a cup of coffee priced at £2.50 is broken down, you see that farmers and their workers get a fraction of what we spend. The biggest cost is for the shop at 88 pence. Then staff working in the shop account for 63 pence. 38 pence goes in tax. Milk, cup stirrers and napkins add up to 28 pence. And then there's the profit of 25 pence. This leaves just 10p for the coffee itself. And of that 10p, just 1p goes to the farmer. And just a fraction of that will go to the pickers. We wanted to speak to a family of coffee workers to understand the impact of low wages that leads to child labour. Many were too frightened to talk to us for fear of reprisals. But one family agreed to talk to us if we protected their identity.
Buenas tardes.
3 generations, including 6 children, live here. They tell us they work on farms that are members of a cooperative that supplies Starbucks and Nespresso, although we were unable to verify this. But we were told their situation is typical of those we saw picking. The grandmother tells me her husband and their 15-year-old son are working a 9-hour day picking coffee.
Do they get enough money?
40 pan por quintal.
Today, how much they would make?
2 quintales. Entre los dos, imagínate.
So that's just enough for food for the whole family.
A veces, limitado.
Sometimes it's not enough money to even feed.
No, porque imagina ya las criaturas necesitan alimento.
On average, our husband and son earn the equivalent of just 44 pence an hour each. We waited for her son to return home at 6 p.m. He left at 6 that morning.
It's a long, tiring day.
Lo que cansa más es llevar el bulto de café hasta el pesadero.
How many days do you do this?
7 días.
7 days. You don't get Sunday off.
De vez en cuando.
How many years have you been picking coffee?
Empecé como de los 5 años en adelante.
And what do you hope to do in the future?
Lo que me gustaría hacer a mí, he pensado bastante, es mecánico o doctor, pero no he dado muy bien con qué voy a estudiar.
That's going to be difficult if you're picking coffee.
Y por eso es que mejor trabajo y hay veces que no voy a la escuela. Siempre necesitamos de algo para estar viviendo.
Coming up, we find out about the checks Starbucks and Nespresso make on coffee farms.
No existe realmente un control efectivo de las marcas sobre el café que están comprando.
In our investigation in Guatemala, we found 11-year-old children working in the coffee fields that supply global brands Starbucks and Nespresso.
Yeah, okay. So that's jalapa, is it?
We've been told by one mill manager that the coffee giants do visit, but it's not clear how many farms they check. He told us that Nespresso comes every year, but Starbucks only once every 2 to 4 years.
Let's go.
We wanted to find out more about the checks the coffee giants make to ensure there's no child labour on the farms that supply them. We headed to a cooperative that sells beans to Starbucks and Nespresso. It was a co-op that receives coffee from the farm where we'd seen these 2 young boys picking on our first trip to Guatemala. The cooperative is also supplied by this farm, where we saw several young girls picking who looked to the team to be aged from 10 to 14. We were told that at the time of filming on our first trip, it was in the process of being certified by an organisation that would enable it to supply beans to Nespresso and Starbucks. On that day, we also saw a small boy who looked to us to be 10, carrying a sack that must have weighed around 60 pounds. He struggled to get all the way to the weighing point. Two months later, we're told that the farm received its certification. At the cooperative, logos for Nespresso and Starbucks adorn the walls. They're 2 major customers here.
There's all of this coffee here that's being dried, says certified by Nespresso AAA.
We spoke to a senior member of staff.
We've visited a few farms and we've seen young people working. Is that normal?
La certificación prohíbe menores de edad, pero andando los papás con los niños sí los protege para que anden con ellos.
And what age are they allowed to work?
Yo le digo, hay edades donde ya pueden empezar a trabajar, 10, 12.
And even on certified farms, as long as their dad's with them?
Correct.
The cooperative also told us that they are given advance warning of any visits made by Nespresso and Starbucks. Campaigners say the system of checks in the coffee industry is flawed.
No existe realmente un control efectivo de las marcas sobre el café que están comprando. Y están los padres por la pobreza obligados a llevar a los niños a cortar café. Hay una falta de control de las marcas, pero también del sector cafetalero guatemalteco, que no está siendo honesto con las marcas a las que les está vendiendo el café. Si se quisieran hacer procesos de certificación reales, se harían visitas continuas, visitas sorpresas, visitas con diferentes personas, se entrevistaría realmente a todos los trabajadores, se entrevistaría a los sindicatos.
During our investigation, we visited 7 different farms and found child labour on all of them. All 7 were linked to Nespresso and 5 of them were linked to Starbucks. Back in the UK, we wanted to know if what we'd witnessed in Guatemala breaches the rules set down by the International Labour Organization, a UN body. We showed our evidence to a human rights solicitor.
First off, if you're looking at children of this sort of age, potentially under 12, it's an outright ban on all forms of work. You know, clearly it shouldn't be happening. You know, it's sad to see.
We'd seen children aged 12 and 13 working around 40 hours a week. Would this be allowed under the regulations?
In developing countries, at least, there is some allowance for light work for children aged between 12 and 14. That usually is said to amount to about 14 hours a week.
That's way beyond 14 hours.
Way beyond 14 hours. The conventions are very clear in that they don't want children's education to be compromised. And if children are working 40 hours a week, there's no way they can also be having a proper education.
There are concerns too about the nature of the work children under 18 are doing.
Generally, agricultural work is considered to be a hazardous work and is generally prohibited under the ILO Convention. As we see here, where there are dangers such as carrying of heavy loads, working in extreme temperatures. These are all unsafe conditions for children, essentially. And in those conditions, children simply shouldn't be working.
We invited Nespresso to be interviewed, but they declined. In a statement, they told us,
Nespresso has zero tolerance of child labour. It is unacceptable. Where there are claims that our high standards are not met, we act immediately. In this case, we've launched a thorough investigation to find out which farms were filmed and whether they supply Nespresso. We will continue to do all we can to stamp child labour out. It has no place in our supply chain.
We also contacted George Clooney, the face of Nespresso. In a statement, he said,
Having grown up working on a tobacco farm, I'm uniquely aware of the complex issues regarding farming and child labor. That's why I joined the Sustainability Advisory Board of Nespresso 7 years ago, with the goal then to improve the lives of farmers. We knew it was a big project when it started 7 years ago, and honestly, I was surprised and saddened to see this story. Clearly, this board and this company still have work to do, and that work will be done. The check and balance of good corporate responsibility lies not just with the company itself, but also independent journalists to hold everyone's promise to account.
Starbucks also declined to be interviewed for our programme. In a statement to dispatchers, they said,
We've launched a full investigation into the claims brought by Channel 4, carried out in partnership with a leading third-party auditor. We can confirm we have not purchased coffee from the farms in question during the most recent harvest season, and we will not do so until we can verify that they are not in breach of cafe practices. Our ethical sourcing programme, developed in partnership with Conservation International, that provides comprehensive social, environmental and economic standards, including zero tolerance for child labour.
What message to the British coffee drinkers?
Yo los invito a pelear, a responsabilizarse porque en Guatemala el café se produzca en condiciones dignas y se respeten los derechos humanos de los trabajadores, que no haya trabajo infantil, que se paguen salarios dignos, seguridad social, que se garanticen los derechos básicos. Y los invito a seguir tomando café de Guatemala, porque tenemos el mejor café del mundo.
There's no doubt that Guatemalan coffee is top quality, but our investigation has shown the darker side of the industry. Let's hope the coffee giants stick to their word and make the future brighter for the families who depend on them.